Welcome to A Founder's Life. I'm your host, Leo Gestetner. On this show, we dive into the real stories behind the highs and lows of entrepreneurship and how we pursue a more balanced and meaningful life along the way. This podcast is sponsored by Thanks, helping founders like us scale with reliable remote talent. Email founders@thanks.com, that's THANKZ.com, with the subject line of Founder's Life to receive preferred pricing. Now, I'm excited today to be joined by Bart Davis. Bart, would you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, thanks, Leo. Appreciate you having me on. Bart Davis. I'm the co-founder and CEO of 512 Financial. We're a fractional services firm based out of Austin, Texas, and doing all things accounting, finance, people, talent for our clients.
Excellent. Do you want to talk a little bit about your journey that brought you to starting your own business, and then a little more about what your business does for your clients, so how you're helping them and what a typical client looks like?
Yeah, for sure. The journey, I think, is it's not unique necessarily, but I would not have ever thought of myself as especially entrepreneurial. I'm an accountant by education and trade, and we tend to be not especially creative, pretty risk averse. And so I think this was probably not what I saw in the cards for myself earlier in my career. But effectively, the story is I started in a kind of a more typical career path as a public accountant and CPA with PwC in Houston. I was auditing oil and gas companies there. And not too long into that, despite enjoying it-ish as much as you can enjoy the grind of public accounting, I got introduced to a guy named Joel Trammell here in Austin. And Joel at the time was the lead investor and board chairman in two lower middle market software companies to 10 to 15 million a piece in revenue. He had been outsourcing the accounting function to a group that with a similar concept, a shared services model, but one that offshored most of the work to India. And it was a cost-effective model. There were components about it he liked, but the output was not what he felt like he needed in order to be able to scale and decision and eventually exit those businesses. And so when we got connected in it was around Easter of 2014, he described the problem set and that he needed, someone of my kind of skill set and makeup to come do what that firm had been doing just for those two companies, until we could eventually get it to a point of selling those businesses. And Joel, very different from me, very entrepreneurial, has had some large successes that, he and his wife built a few companies and scaled them and exited for 200 million, I think was the bigger one, but that was not the only large one. And so it just kind of felt like an opportunity that didn't present itself all the time. And so I kind of was looking at, I've got, the kind of the typical path, PwC. There's a very specific career trajectory that appealed to my accountant brain. But again, there was this thing of like, I don't know that stuff like this is going to come along all the time. And so I jumped on that opportunity back in 2014. And we did it just for those two companies or affiliated companies for the next 7 years. So we sold the first of those original two in the summer of 2018. And then we sold the second of those original two in May of 2021. And that second sale was sort of the impetus to look at my 4-person team and look around the Austin marketplace and kind of go, I think we're good at this and we should be doing it for the market. And so it wasn't, it was something that we had done before. I had a team, we had a couple of legacy clients. It felt logical, albeit still risky, to kind of go out and start the business. So that's the story in a nutshell.
Yes, and it's funny. I would say at least 2/3, if not more, of the people that I chat to on this podcast are accidental entrepreneurs. So they didn't aim to be, but they fell into it for one reason or another. In the end, they realized they were good at it, or they got fired from a job, or they, whatever reason, they sort of accidentally ended up as an entrepreneur and end up building a business around that, pretty successful businesses. And talk to us about how family looks for you.
Yeah, so I've been married for coming up on 14 years. Met my wife in college in San Antonio, lived on the same hall freshman year, started dating sophomore year, rest is history. And then we've got 2 little girls. One is 5, one will be 2 in June. And they certainly keep me on my toes, as I'm sure that you or any other parent out there can imagine.
Lovely little ones. I can barely remember that. Mine are 20 and 23 now.
My goodness, yeah. I know it goes fast, so I've been told, and so I've seen so far in these last 5 years. But
it does, and all ages are fun, is what I would say. Yeah, as I mentioned to you earlier, I've just come back from 2 weeks in Japan, of which 10 days of it was with my son. So I did the marathon and then spent 10 days, and I just love that time with my kids.
Yeah,
Nothing
yeah, that's
quite like
wonderful.
it. And how does health look for you? And health, really you could define as mental health, physical health, nutrition, sort of any aspects that really are an important part of your life.
Yes, I've kind of learned to re-emphasize the physical fitness component recently. You mentioned running the marathon. I did a good bit of running earlier in my life when I had more time on my hands. I ran a full marathon and probably a dozen or so half marathons. It's probably been 5 or 6 years now since the last one. Again, the kid, there's a correlation here. Training for that takes a good bit of time, and also gets harder because now you're pushing a stroller around. So anyway, I kind of like, so between that life change and starting the business, which were not too far apart. Our first daughter was born in January of 21. We started the business at kind of late 21, beginning of 22. And so I sort of took my eye off of the ball from a physical fitness perspective. Not that I became a slob or anything, but it definitely was not a huge priority that it had been before. And I have probably in the last, I don't know, 9 months or so sort of reprioritized the physical fitness side. And, I feel like it's made a really big difference on my productivity from a work perspective, energy level, focus, et cetera, that I didn't notice. And I thought that taking the time, whether it be a workout at lunch, whether it be one early in the morning before the girls wake up or things like that, I felt like that would be taking away from networking or productive disrupted time. And so I deprioritized it for a while, and I didn't notice that it was impacting productivity. But now in hindsight, that I'm getting to get into the gym probably 4 or 5 times a week, and like I can absolutely feel the difference, not just in like how I feel physically, but also how I perform at work.
Yeah, no question. I'm a big believer in healthy body, healthy mind. And I think it does affect everything. It does affect, work, yes. It affects how you can show up as a parent. To be honest, as they get a little older, it's a great influence. And I can say that as someone who, by the way, 20 years ago was 95 pounds heavier than I am now. So I'm by far the health and fitness I've been in my life. And my kids have seen that transformation. And I've seen how that has influenced them. Fitness is important to both of my kids in the different forms it takes. So yeah, I think it's important. And what do you like to do for fun?
Fun is not a thing there's a whole ton of time for, although maybe just like fitness, I need to sort of rethink how the prioritization goes. I'm a big sports nut. I grew up in Wisconsin. The Packers were effectively my religion growing up. So the Packers are big. The Packers in all things Wisconsin sports. I'm really excited for March Madness coming up. Packers, Badgers, Brewers, Bucks. Like I'm still all in. Although I've now lived in Texas for about as long as I lived in Wisconsin, but all that is very stuck in my blood. So to the extent I can either get 2 games when one of those teams happens to be in Texas, or maybe even make a little trip out of it. I like to do that. Probably the nerdiest habit I have is I like bird watching quite a bit. So that is something that when I have time and I can get the baby, she just falls asleep in the car while we do a few loops or something, and I can check out some birds. So that's one that I try to do as much as I can. And then, obviously just spending quality time with the family. We like to travel when we're able to and when schedules allow, and all that good stuff as well.
And how do you sort of make sure that you balance everything? So, you're working hard, as all entrepreneurs are, but, you want to make time for your family, important to make time for fitness and a little bit of fun here and there, right, in whatever form that takes. And how do you make sure that you balance all of that?
Yeah, I think, so one thing that I did pretty much right away when we had a kid, which I did not do when it was just myself and my wife, is really, really protect 6 to 9 in the AM and the PM. And that may not sound like a lot, but like that's kind of, that's what we have with our kids realistically, right? Like they're in daycare from 9 to 5. They wake up early. And my older daughter tends to go to bed kind of late. But so those are the windows of opportunity that we have on a typical workday to spend with them. And those often also can be times for networking, breakfasts or happy hours or whatever. And so I used to do a lot of those things. And so it was a conscious decision to go no, if I'm not taking the early morning meeting, I am not going to the happy hour. I am not, with obviously there are limited exceptions to any rule, but like in general, whereas my work days had a tendency to stretch out on either side for either an event or just because of busyness or time zones or whatever it might be, that has been something that has become very sacred time in our house, is like the wake up until daycare and daycare until bed is just like not really touchable time.
I love that. What has been for you a pivotal moment in your life?
I mean, certainly having kids, the having kids and also having the first kid in the middle, kind of in peak COVID, was pivotal. I think for us, fortunately, it went very well. We had jobs that were flexible. We really enjoy spending time together, the two of us. It wasn't like we got shut into our house and went like, gosh, like this is too much. But it was pivotal, I think we sort of rediscovered some things about each other in that time. We did like silly, goofy stuff like whipped cream trick shot videos and, just stupid little, challenges that you see on the internet just to keep ourselves sane while we weren't allowed to go anywhere. And so, yeah, I look back on it. I think COVID was really, really challenging for some people, from a mental health perspective. For us, we kind of thrived in it. And I think it made us really appreciate what we have and, what we have in each other. And then with the family additions and again, the flexibility that like during that time we built an office in our backyard where I sit today, and like that, having that ability is something that we didn't take for granted. We, it felt extremely fortunate through that. I think in a way that maybe we might have a little bit taken for granted before that.
Yeah, I think COVID, as you said, definitely some challenges for people and some positives. I mean, for me, I just loved the time with my kids, my kids generally, but especially with my son. We built a routine where we spent 3 hours a day to continued until he went off to college, working out, weightlifting, boxing, dinner, watching some TV. It just became a routine that continued. So yeah, I think there definitely can be some silver linings in some of these things as well. And what's one piece of advice you'd give to an aspiring entrepreneur?
I think it's just like eyes wide open and be willing to accept that as hard as you can work and as much as you can control, there are some things that are out of your control, and there has to be some level of maybe not comfort, but at least acceptance with that, because I had, especially in the early going, even though it's always for the most part gone pretty well, I still just got frustrated, with like, I know I or the team are doing certain things right. And, the outcome isn't exactly what we had in mind. And like, why the hell not, And so, yeah, I mean, that may be overly simple, but it's like, there's a lot that's not in your control. There's a lot of decision making without all of the data that you would maybe like to have, because if you wait until you're able to find every piece of data to make that decision, that the opportunity may have already passed by you. So I think things in that sort of realm would be my advice to aspiring entrepreneurs.
Excellent. And how can people find you?
So we're very active on LinkedIn, 512 Financial, obviously. And then our website, 512financial.com, which as of probably a couple weeks from now is about to get quite the facelift that I'm very excited about. We made the decision to hire a CMO recently, and she basically said, hey, look, like I or any other CMO worth their salt is not going to come on full time until you do something about this website, which hurt a little. But after I, took the ego part out of it, we've seen a ton of progress in the last 3 or 4 months on that, and really excited for that to be revealed. But you can find us there for now. It's got a lot of good content as is. It maybe just doesn't flow the way that it should, and that will be resolved in the next couple of weeks here. So.
Nice. It's not one you designed personally, is it?
Oh no. This we hired the pros for it. Yeah, no, it would not. The way that it was before was more along the lines of how it would look if I designed it personally, and yeah, it wasn't good enough, which is fine because I am not a marketer, and that's okay.
That's fair enough. And thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, Leo, I appreciate it.
And thank you for listening to today's episode. And if you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, tell your friends, and leave a review.